there, this is Mark Pew again, and I am happy to be here with Susan Shemanski. I have not known her for very long, basically about a month. We met at the National Council of Self-Insurers conference in Orlando back in June, and she had a very provocative panel where she talked about her return to work program and the inclusion of not-for-profits with that. So Susan, would you share with the audience kind of who you work with at Adecco and some initial thoughts about where you're headed with your return to work program?
Yes, thank you, Mark. It was great meeting you at the conference. And I'm the Vice President of Risk Management at Adecco, and we do temporary staffing globally. So as you can imagine, we have some real challenges when it comes to return to work. Most times our clients do not want us to send somebody with an injury back to the work site. So we need to be creative and do a lot of work with not-for-profits to keep our injured workers engaged.
So with that kind of organization, you've got a lot of people that probably are working paycheck to paycheck. You certainly cover pretty much any job that humanity can do on planet Earth at this juncture. So there's a lot of different restrictions, a lot of different expectations. So you're different than a lot of different employers who have very specific roles and responsibilities. So how is it difficult to manage 50 different states? A variety of different, I think you mentioned that you have doctors as well as kind of factory workers. So you've got people who have GEDs all the way to people that have PhDs. So how does a return to work program that covers such a diverse workplace, how does that work? How does your mind not explode every morning at 8 a.m.?
So you are correct that we employ everyone from factory workers, IT, doctors. So it really does span every occupation. And it takes the whole team to really be able to successfully complete our return to work program. We involve our risk management department, our claims administrator, our branch offices, sometimes even our clients in the process. And our focus is always on abilities. So from the first time that the injured worker goes to the doctor, we're asking that doctor to really look at what are they able to do to get them back into some work capacity. And a lot of times it is modified, but we find that with a lot of people working paycheck to paycheck, this really keeps their morale up and they're motivated to get quality treatment and get back to full duty at some point.
So return to work is so important, and work itself is so important to the self-esteem of so many people beyond the finances of it. And I noted you had been there, you've been at Adecco for 2 years, and the return to work program wasn't working in full steam, and you've incorporated some programs. And I think you mentioned that you've reduced cost over those 2 years by about $7 million by really focusing on that return to work. So beyond the morale, which I totally agree, that increases the morale because from what I've gathered, it's really kind of that patient advocacy we're trying our best to get you back to work to some way or shape or form. What was that journey for you in coming into a return to work program that wasn't necessarily firing on all cylinders to a point now where you've got a very active return to work program and saving money?
So Adecco had a return to work program, but what we've really done over the last 2 years is hold people accountable and really focus on making it a good experience for the injured worker. So we utilize the data within our claims administrator system to really pinpoint the reason someone is not back to work. And it could be as simple as the doctor hasn't released them. If that's the case, we'll follow up with the doctor to really address those abilities again. Or it could be that our branch told the claims adjuster they didn't have a job, and then our risk department takes over and works with the not-for-profit to place the injured worker. And through that whole process, we're very focused on communication, holding everybody accountable for the part that they add to the whole process. And we have to be aware of the different state laws, what letters need to be sent out, what needs to be provided to the injured worker, can they work the same shifts? And we put all that together with the team, and then we pay the injured worker their pre-injury salary while they're working at the not-for-profit. And through this whole process, we really ask the not-for-profit to give us feedback as well. Is that injured worker able to conduct the things that the doctor said they could? Do they have a sense of returning back to full duty? And are they showing up every day? Are they going to their medical treatments? And we have found it to be very successful.
I love the concept of not-for-profit. It seems like that ultimate win-win circumstance, because not-for-profits are always looking for inexpensive labor to achieve their purpose. What guided you to think in terms of incorporating a not-for-profit in your return to work program? Because so many return to work programs are so focused on returning the employee back to their original job. And you're like, if they can't go there, let's put them someplace where they can, start building that ability. So what went through your head to try to incorporate a not-for-profit? Because I think that's just a brilliant idea.
We were looking for an option that they could work at their own pace, but still have supervision. So we thought the not-for-profits were an excellent match. They have somebody that's on site that's used to working with people with disabilities. So they're in tune to some of the challenges that the injured worker may have. And they're never going to be focused on production, but more on the healing process. So it allows our worker to get back into that work mindset, and the disability mindset does not set in, but it also gives them that reinforcement that they realize they're going through an injury and that they're in that healing process.
Gotcha. It's interesting. You mentioned to me at one point that you've mentioned the opportunity of going to a not-for-profit, and all of a sudden some injured workers miraculously heal very quickly and they decide to go back to work. Can you explain maybe what you perceive as what's going on inside their head? Is you don't really give them an option just to sit at home, in other words.
Exactly. And if somebody really does have a serious injury, they're more than willing to go and work at one of these jobs. And we actually see our lost time days are an average of about 34 days if they go through the program. But for the injured workers that really do not have an injury that requires time out of work, once they know they're not going to be able to sit home and watch TV all day or be out doing whatever they'd like to do, they decide it would be better to go back to the job rather than go to the not-for-profit. So within the couple days that we make the offer for them to go back to work, we're finding they're telling their doctor, I think I can go back to my full-time job, which that's a success as well. We're getting them back to work a lot sooner at full duty.
Absolutely. And one of the things I gathered is a very proactive, quick response to this. You're not waiting for things to kind of unwind into those, people have different ways of describing the claims that go south, but you don't wait around to see which direction it's heading. At what point do you start interacting? What kind of data are you looking at to go, now's the time to kind of intervene and let's figure out what we can do to kind of push them back towards a return to work mindset?
So we start that day one. We encourage our branch offices when they're reporting the loss to have the injured worker speak to a nurse case manager at a clinical consult line as we're reporting the claim. And they're right away addressing if the person thinks they can go back to work, do they have any fears about going back to work? And our goal is really for the claim never to become an indemnity claim. We want them to be able to return to work within that waiting period, whether it be 3 days, 7 days. So we address that immediately with the doctor.
Gotcha. And all that you've talked about, there's a lot of moving parts associated with this, and a lot of this came to fruition during your tenure there. What is it like to change the culture? And you said that Adecco had a return to work program, obviously, before your arrival, but it's quite a bit different now. So from a cultural standpoint, how do you affect a cultural change within risk management, within HR, which within the branch offices, with the injured workers and employees themselves? How is it possible to change the trajectory and the mindset, if you will, the culture of how return to work is handled?
So our goal is not for it to be a punitive program. We really want the best thing for the injured worker. We've done a lot of training with our claims team, with our field offices, our HR, legal, risk, just that we're all working together and we're all doing our part to make sure the injured worker has that best experience and goes back to work as soon as possible. So as I had said before, it's really focused on the abilities. And we find getting them back to work is just the first step. But once they're back in that modified job, we really have to stay focused on getting them back to full duty. Mm-hmm. So each time they go back for another doctor visit, we're asking the doctor, are they able to do anything more? How are they progressing? Can we add another duty? So if they're at a not-for-profit organization and maybe they start by just sorting colored hangers, and then the next thing is, can they hang some clothes on those hangers? And then maybe later put them on racks, just so they have that constant progression to get back to full duty.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned that one of the mindset changes you had to do was kind of in some cases, victory was being declared once they got back to work, yet modified duty, and then oftentimes a lot of the focus would kind of change, and it wasn't that continued focus until, okay, we got you at 10%, now we're going to work on 15%, now we're going to work on 20%. So that in itself was kind of a change in mindset, right?
Correct. When I first started looking at the program, I was noticing there were a lot of injured workers that were reaching the 12-week point. And we typically stop our modified duty program at 12 weeks. They were going back onto comp, and that really wasn't good for them. It wasn't good for us. So now at about 70 days rather than the 90 days, we're really having a discussion with them. Are there any barriers keeping you from going back to work? We're talking with the doctor about the ODG guidelines if someone's outside of those. So our focus is either keep them at work right from the beginning or make sure they get back to full duty. That modifies just the initial step.
Gotcha. Great. Well, I really appreciate all these insights. It's being able to peer behind the curtain a little bit on how it is to kind of reframe the mindset of return to work. If there are some employers that are watching this that are interested in going down this path, what are some, 2 or 3 nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to pass along to them as they anticipate this? What are some struggles, some obstacles that you had? What are some lessons learned that you had? What are some things that they should specifically focus on just to help them kind of get over that inertia and actually convert it into actual change momentum?
I would say one of the key things we did early on is have discussions with our panel doctors that we have a focus on return to work. And then each time we have a claim, we send a letter out to them through the TPA that reminds the doctor of our focus and asking them to provide information about what that injured worker can do. And we try to make it as easy as possible for the doctor by just having a checklist of, can you stand, sit, how many pounds can you lift? We found that the easier it is for the doctor to just check things off, the better compliance we get. Another item that we found to be critical to the program is providing the doctor with the job descriptions. So we created a bank of job descriptions. We keep it on our TPA team site, and the claims adjuster sends that over to the doctor. That's really helped with the doctor releasing to full duty. And then I think it's important to have data to help you pinpoint what your issues are. And we find our two big ones are the doctor hasn't released them or we haven't provided a job. And then we have a plan around each of those triggers as to who jumps in and gets involved. So if it's the doctor with the holdup, that would be up to the claims examiner or the nurse case manager. If we haven't provided a job, we have a return to work coordinator here in our risk department that handles everything from that point.
Gotcha. I've continued to hear in the presentation that you did, the National Council of Self-Insurers, and during this time, communication is so key. And in fact, it almost sounds like you over communicate, which is, it sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a great thing, right?
Right. The communication is really key. I would say focus, communication, and accountability are the three things all of us that are administering this are focused on, because it does involve so many different people in the process that we need to make sure we're all in sync and getting the job done.
Mm-hmm. So FCA, focus, communication, accountability. That's something easy for people to remember, right?
Exactly. It works for a lot of different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Susan. It's been great getting to know you over the last month or so, and I really appreciate the insight into kind of reinventing a return to work program in a very complex circumstance at Adecco, and I appreciate you sharing your insights, and I'm sure these will be very helpful to a lot of people.
Thanks a lot, Mark. It's been my pleasure.
All right, take care.
Thanks.